Hello, my name is Amy Baines, and I'm a Senior Program Manager with the Office of Criminal Justice Programs. I'm joined here today by Gary Lee, who is a Program Manager with OCJP. Today, we will be discussing programmatic monitoring. The purpose of programmatic monitoring is to determine if a subrecipient is compliant with the requirements of state and/or federal programs, applicable laws, and regulations, as well as to determine if a subrecipient is implementing their project as described in the grant contract scope of services with the stated goals and outcomes. Subrecipients are added to the monitoring plan based on their level of risk as determined by OCJP. A few examples of factors that influence the level of risk include the amount of funding the subrecipient receives, turnover in project leadership, staffing issues, and project implementation issues. Subrecipients can expect to be monitored both programmatically and fiscally at least once during the life of the contract. Monitoring notification. If subrecipients are on the monitoring plan, your program manager will reach out to the project director to secure a date that works for both parties for the monitoring visit. The authorized official will receive a confirmation email approximately 1 month prior to the monitoring. The project director will receive an email detailing items that will need to be submitted for the monitoring. Certain items may be requested for review prior to the monitoring visit, while other items will be reviewed on site. Agencies must be prepared for the monitoring visit and have available all the information requested by the program manager. Here are some examples of monitoring documents that may be requested. Pre-review documents may include the agency's policy and procedures manual, a list of client case files funded through the grant, and other project-specific documents. On-site review documents may include the agency grant file to include the signed grant contract and any amendments, signed certifications and special conditions, grant reports, and copies of any OCJP special notifications or approvals. Also, personnel files for grant-funded staff, redacted client files, completed client surveys, and an explanation of the process for data collection. Documents completed by the subrecipients. Agencies will be required to complete 2 Adobe Sign documents prior to the monitoring visit. The first Adobe Sign document is the Civil Rights Attestation. This form is used to determine subrecipient compliance with civil rights rules and regulations. Program managers will also check items on site, such as limited English proficiency policies and civil rights training certificates. The second Adobe Sign document is the Personnel Volunteer Certification. This form is used to document that required items are a part of the personnel file for grant-funded staff and volunteers. Program managers will spot check one personnel file while on site to confirm what is in the certification. And please note, by electronically signing these documents, the subrecipient is certifying that the information contained in them is accurate and correct. Entrance conference. The monitoring visit will begin with an entrance conference. The project director is required to be present during this time. The authorized official may attend, but is not required. The monitor will explain the monitoring process and schedule for the day. It is preferred that agencies have a conference room or office available for the monitor to use while on site and access to Wi-Fi if possible. Make sure to have gathered all items needed for the monitoring and have them ready for the monitor to review. Additional information may also need to be gathered while on site. The monitor will communicate that to you if so. The monitor will sign a conflict of interest and confidentiality statement as well. During the monitoring visit, all grant-funded staff must be available for interviews by the program monitor. Equipment and other items purchased with grant funds should be made available for review while on site. Client confidentiality is of the utmost concern, and any personally identifying information should be fully redacted. Client confidentiality rules do not apply to subrecipients that client information is public record. The monitor will review documentation to confirm the delivery of services to clients as stated in the grant contract scope of services. The monitor will request a list of clients to be identified by number that have been served by the agency during the current fiscal year. While on site, the monitor will review documentation of client services provided for a randomly selected sample that will be communicated to the agency prior to the visit. The exit conference. At the conclusion of the on-site monitoring visit, the monitor will hold an exit conference. The project director is required to attend the exit conference. The authorized official may attend as well, but it is not required. The monitor will discuss any items of concerns or known findings and/or observations at the time of the exit conference. Additional findings or observations could be identified at a later date as well. The monitor will also review the corrective action plan procedure. Agencies will be provided a copy of the exit conference memo for their reference. And finally, the monitor will email you a link to the monitoring survey so we can receive your feedback on the process. And now I'm going to turn it over to Gary Lee for the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Amy. Next up is the monitoring report. The monitor may request additional information after the on-site monitoring visit has concluded. This is called fieldwork. The project director will be instructed to submit any additional fieldwork information via email or through OCJP's SharePoint portal. Within 30 business days after receiving all the additional fieldwork, the monitor will send a monitoring report to the agency's authorized official detailing any findings and/or observations. Subrecipients are required to respond to any findings and/or observations with a corrective action plan, also known as a CAP, within 30 business days. If no findings or observations were identified during the on-site monitoring, a no findings monitoring report will be sent to the authorized official. Next slide. Corrective action plan. What to include? Corrective action plans, also referred to as a CAP, should include a statement of whether the subrecipient agrees with the findings or not. Please note that the CAP must be signed by the authorized official. The CAP detailed statement of how the agency will address each individual finding or observation to prevent future non-compliance. The authorized official or his or her designee should attach any documents, forms, policy changes, reports, timesheets, data collection forms, etc., that ensures the subrecipient has corrected the findings. Please note that there is a CAP template that can be used by the subrecipient, and it is available for use in the OCJP Grants Manual. Next slide. Common monitoring findings. A review of all the monitoring findings are done by OCJP after the conclusion of the monitoring season. Some of the findings that are of special attention include the following: lack of required notifications. This is found in Section 2 of the OCJP Grants Manual, and one example of one of these findings includes a change in one of the 3 key positions that the agency does not make OCJP aware. The next finding that is common is expense receipt documentation is inaccurate and/or ineligible. Further information on this is found in Section 3 of the OCJP Grants Manual, and one of the examples is the agency does not have any receipts or invoices for equipment utilizing grant funds. The next finding is insufficient documentation of grant-funded services. Further information can be found in Section 20 of the OCJP Grants Manual. One example of this is the agency's client files are not maintained or secured properly. Next slide. The next common monitoring findings is inadequate confidentiality policy. Again, this is also found in Section 20 of the OCJP Grants Manual. And one of the examples is the agency's confidential policy is inadequate and does not meet OCJP requirements. The next finding are invoices submitted late to OCJP. This is found in Section 7 of the OCJP Grants Manual, and an example includes the agency submits invoices for reimbursement after 30 days. The next finding to be discussed is the agency does not have a system to track time on grant projects. Additional information is found in Section 6 of the OCJP Grants Manual, and an example includes the agency's time reporting policy does not state how time worked on grant activities is recorded. Next slide. Continuing on, another common finding is no background check policy or a limited English proficiency policy. Additional information on these policies can be found in Section 6 and Section 22 of the OCJP Grants Manual. The next one is personnel records missing required documentation. Again, this is found in Section 6 of the OCJP Grants Manual, and one example includes the employees do not have a copy of a completed background check or a completed I-9 form in their personnel file. Another common finding are reports submitted late or contain inaccurate information. Additional information can be found in Section 7 of the OCJP Grants Manual, and an example of this finding includes agencies submitting reports after the required due date during the reporting period. Next slide. Continuing on, another common finding is an agency charging unallowable cost. One of the more common occurrences, as an example, includes an agency invoicing for state and local taxes. Additional information can be found in Section 15 of the OCJP Grants Manual. Another finding is the required e-training for board members for nonprofit agencies. Additional information can be found in the OCJP Grants Manual under Achievement of Operation Status, Section E, specifically for the authorized official. Another required training is for the Criminal Injury Compensation or CIC training. This training is required for those fund sources of VOCA. Next slide. For those agencies with a subcontract, there is specific information and requirements found in Section 13 of the OCJP Grants Manual. One common finding that we see through monitoring is the subcontract has not been monitored within 6 months of its start. And there is a specific subcontract monitoring form that can be located on OCJP's website. Other findings are certification of time charged to a single award form has not been completed. Additional information can be found in Section 6 of the OCJP Grants Manual. Another common finding is the state of Tennessee's comptroller sign is not posted or is the improper size. Additional information can be found under the OCJP Grants Manual under the pre-award requirements. If you have any questions about the comptroller sign, please contact your OCJP program manager who can assist you in obtaining the correct poster. Next slide. Continuing on, other findings include civil rights compliance training not completed. This information is found in Section 22 of the OCJP Grants Manual. One example is the improper training is provided to the agency personnel. There is an online training link of the specific civil rights training that must be completed, and that link is found on OCJP's website. Continuing on with civil rights is the civil rights sign is not posted properly. This poster can be downloaded from OCJP's website, and your program manager can assist you in providing the exact location of where this poster should be displayed. Next slide. Tips for successful monitoring. OCJP encourages the project director to ask questions. Your assigned program manager will provide the answers you need and will offer the appropriate guidance to help throughout this process. Also, OCJP recommends everyone who works under the grant to be familiar with the contract, to include the scope of services, the budget, and the respective special conditions. Remember, the scope of services can be a helpful tool to evaluate the current progress of the program and determine if the stated goals and objectives in the contract are being met. Lastly, be diligent in submitting the required information for the monitoring. Prior to and throughout the monitoring process, the program monitor will advise you of certain due dates that information is to be completed and/or submitted via email or the OCJP SharePoint portal. Next slide.
Thank you for joining us for the Programmatic Monitoring training today. Have a great day.